She was just trying to do her job when the wedding planner turned her into a laughingstock in front of 200 guests. They called her cheap, worthless, and said she didn't belong there. What they didn't know was that the groom had been watching everything, and he was about to reveal a secret that would destroy their careers forever. If you've ever been treated like you don't matter because of how you look or what you do for work, this story will make you believe in justice again. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Maya Torres had always believed that love was the most beautiful thing in the world, which made her job as a florist the perfect fit. At 28, she ran a small flower shop called Petals and Dreams in the older part of downtown, where rent was affordable and her regular customers had become like family. Her hands were always stained with soil and stem juice, her aprons permanently marked with pollen, but she wouldn't have it any other way. Every morning, Maya arrived at her shop before sunrise, carefully arranging fresh blooms that had been delivered from local farms. She knew each flower by name, understood which combinations would make people smile, and took pride in creating arrangements that captured exactly what her customers were feeling. Weddings were her specialty, though most couples who came to her were working with tight budgets and dreaming of something beautiful within their means. Maya lived in a small apartment above her shop, where she could hear the gentle hum of the refrigeration units keeping her flowers fresh. Her furniture was second-hand but comfortable, her walls covered with photos of wedding arrangements she had created over the years. Each picture represented a couple's special day, and Maya treasured every single one. She drove an old Honda that her father had helped her buy when she first opened the shop, and though it needed repairs more often than she'd like, it got her where she needed to go. Her younger brother David had always been the star of their family. While Maya was content with her simple life, David had graduated from Harvard Business School and seemed destined for greatness. Their parents, both hard-working immigrants who ran a small restaurant, were incredibly proud of both their children, but Maya often felt like the ordinary one next to her brilliant brother. David would call her every week from whatever city his business took him to, always asking about the shop, always encouraging her to dream bigger, but Maya was happy with her corner of the world. The morning that would change everything started like any other. Maya was arranging white roses and baby's breath for a small wedding when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, and the woman on the other end spoke with the kind of crisp authority that made Maya immediately straighten up. "This is Victoria Sterling from Sterling Events," the woman said. "We need a florist for an emergency wedding replacement this Saturday. Can you handle 300 guests at the Grand Ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel?" Maya's heart stopped. Sterling Events was the most prestigious wedding planning company in the city, the kind of operation that handled celebrity weddings and society events with budgets larger than most people's annual salaries. The Grand Ballroom was legendary, a venue where politicians and business titans celebrated their most important moments. "I think there might be some mistake," Maya said carefully. "I usually work with smaller weddings, more intimate celebrations. There's no mistake. Our regular florist had a family emergency, and we need someone immediately." The bride specifically requested someone who could work with a natural, garden-fresh aesthetic. "Your name came highly recommended." Maya's mind raced. This was the opportunity she had never even dared to dream about. But it was also terrifying. Her largest wedding had been for 80 people, and even that had stretched her resources to the limit. "What kind of budget are we working with?" Maya asked. "$25,000 for florals," Victoria said, as if it were pocket change. "Can you do it or not?" Maya closed her eyes and thought about every wedding she had ever done, every bride she had made smile, every arrangement that had captured a perfect moment of love. "Yes," she said, "I can do it." The next 3 days were a whirlwind of preparation unlike anything Maya had ever experienced. She called every supplier she knew, arranged for additional refrigeration, and worked 18-hour days creating the most beautiful arrangements of her career. She designed tall centerpieces with cascading orchids and roses, delicate boutonnieres with tiny succulents and jasmine, and a bridal bouquet that looked like it had been gathered from a secret garden. Maya rented a larger van to transport everything and bought a new black dress that she hoped would help her blend in with the upscale crowd. She had never worked an event where she might encounter millionaires and celebrities, and she wanted to look professional even if she felt completely out of her depth. Saturday morning arrived gray and drizzling, which made Maya worry about the outdoor ceremony setup, but by noon, the sun had emerged and everything looked perfect. She arrived at the Metropolitan Hotel 3 hours early, her van packed with flowers that represented the biggest risk and biggest opportunity of her career. The grand ballroom was even more magnificent than Maya had imagined. Crystal chandeliers hung from a ceiling painted with cherubs and gold leaf, marble columns supported graceful archways, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered views of the city skyline. Maya felt like she had stepped into a fairy tale, and for a moment she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to attend an event here as a guest rather than a vendor. Victoria Sterling appeared as Maya was unloading her first cart of arrangements. Victoria was tall and sharp, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Maya's monthly rent, her silver hair pulled back in a perfect chignon. She moved with the efficiency of someone who controlled every detail of very expensive events, and Maya could immediately tell that this woman tolerated no mistakes. "You must be the florist," Victoria said, looking Maya up and down with an expression that suggested she was already finding her lacking. "I hope you understand that this is not like your usual work. These guests expect perfection, and the bride's family has very specific standards." Maya nodded, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "I understand completely. I've brought everything we discussed, and I think you'll be pleased with the quality." Victoria picked up one of Maya's centerpieces and examined it closely, her fingers touching the petals as if she were inspecting them for flaws. "These roses are nice," she said slowly, "but they're not David Austin roses, are they?" The bride specifically requested David Austin roses. Maya felt her stomach drop. David Austin roses were incredibly expensive and had to be specially ordered weeks in advance. Victoria had never mentioned them during their phone conversation, and Maya had created beautiful arrangements with the finest roses she could source on short notice. "I wasn't told about that specific requirement," Maya said carefully. "But these are premium roses, and I think they capture the garden aesthetic perfectly." Victoria's expression hardened. The garden aesthetic means specific varieties, not just any roses you found at the flower market. "This is exactly what I was worried about when we had to use an unknown vendor." Maya felt heat rise in her cheeks but kept her voice steady. "I can work with what I've brought to create exactly the look you want. Every wedding I've done has exceeded the couple's expectations." Victoria set down the centerpiece with a small sigh. "Well, I suppose we'll have to make do. Just try to keep a low profile once the guests arrive. These people aren't used to dealing with vendors directly." The dismissal stung, but Maya focused on her work. She spent the next 2 hours transforming the ballroom into a garden paradise, using every skill she had learned over years of creating beauty on tight budgets. She wove ivy through the chandeliers, created intimate conversation areas with carefully placed arrangements, and turned the altar into something that looked like it belonged in a secret garden. As Maya put the finishing touches on the bridal table, other vendors began arriving. The caterers wore crisp uniforms and moved with military precision, the musicians dressed in formal concert attire, and the photographers carried equipment that probably cost more than Maya's car. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged in this world of luxury, and Maya felt increasingly like an imposter. The wedding coordinator, a young woman named Jessica who worked for Victoria, approached Maya as she was adjusting the last centerpiece. "The arrangements look nice," Jessica said with a smile, "but Victoria wants to make sure you understand that once the ceremony starts, you should stay in the service areas. The family prefers vendors to remain invisible during the celebration." Maya nodded, though the instruction felt like another small rejection. At the intimate weddings she usually worked, she was often thanked personally by the couple, and sometimes even invited to stay for cake. Here, she was being told to hide. As the first guests began arriving, Maya retreated to a service corridor where she could watch through a partially open door. She had never seen such elegance in person. Women in designer gowns that cost more than Maya made in months glided across the marble floors, their jewelry catching the light from the chandeliers. Men in perfectly tailored tuxedos moved with the confidence that came from never having to worry about money. Maya recognized some faces from magazine covers and news programs. There was a tech entrepreneur who had been featured on the cover of Forbes, a judge whose political career made regular headlines, and several people she was certain were celebrities, though she couldn't place their names. These were people who lived in a completely different world from hers, where $25,000 for flowers was a reasonable expense. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The bride arrived in a dress that looked like it had been spun from moonlight and dreams. She was tall and graceful, with the kind of natural beauty that photographs perfectly, and Maya could see why someone would spare no expense for her wedding day. The groom was handsome in a quiet way, with kind eyes and a smile that suggested he was genuinely happy rather than just posing for pictures. Victoria appeared at Maya's elbow. "The ceremony is about to start," she said quietly. "I need you to check that all the arrangements are positioned correctly, but please be quick and discreet." Maya slipped into the ballroom and moved efficiently between the arrangements, adjusting a stem here and straightening a ribbon there. Everything looked perfect, and she felt a surge of pride at what she had accomplished. These flowers rivaled anything she had seen in the luxury wedding magazines she sometimes browsed during slow afternoons at her shop. As she bent to adjust the lowest tier of the altar arrangement, she heard a woman's voice behind her. "Excuse me, but what are you doing?" Maya turned to find herself face to face with an elegant woman in her 50s, wearing a pearl necklace that probably cost more than Maya's annual rent. The woman's expression was not unkind, but there was clearly confusion about why Maya was touching the wedding decorations. "I'm the florist," Maya explained quietly. "Just making some final adjustments before the ceremony begins." "The florist?" The woman looked surprised. "I thought Victoria used that high-end firm from the Upper East Side for all her events." "There was a last-minute change," Maya said, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the attention. "I should probably get back to the service area now." But the woman's comment had been overheard by several nearby guests, and Maya suddenly found herself the center of unwanted attention. She tried to move away from the altar, but more people had gathered, curious about the conversation. Victoria appeared as if summoned by some invisible alarm, her expression tight, with barely controlled irritation. "Is there a problem here?" "Margaret was just asking about the florist," the woman in pearls said. "She seemed surprised that you weren't using your usual vendor." Victoria's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "We had to make some last-minute adjustments due to circumstances beyond our control. Everything is under control, I assure you." Maya felt like she was shrinking under the weight of so many stares. She tried again to excuse herself, but Victoria caught her arm. "Since you're here," Victoria said loudly enough for the surrounding guests to hear, "perhaps you could explain to everyone why the roses aren't David Austin varieties as specifically requested." The question felt like a trap, and Maya realized with growing horror that Victoria was using her as a scapegoat in front of these influential guests. "I wasn't informed about that specific requirement," Maya said quietly, hoping to end the conversation quickly. "You weren't informed?" Victoria's voice carried a note of theatrical disbelief. "I specifically mentioned David Austin roses during our phone conversation. These are clearly just standard roses from a wholesale market." Maya felt her face burning with embarrassment, but she also felt a spark of anger at the unfairness of the accusation. "I have documentation of our entire conversation, and that specific variety was never mentioned. These roses are premium quality and create exactly the garden aesthetic that was requested." Victoria laughed, a sound like ice clinking in an expensive glass. "I think perhaps you misunderstood what premium means in this context. These arrangements might be fine for a small church wedding, but they're hardly appropriate for guests of this caliber." The crowd of onlookers had grown, and Maya could see people pulling out phones to record what was becoming a public spectacle. She wanted nothing more than to disappear, but Victoria seemed determined to continue the humiliation. "Look at this bouquet," Victoria continued, picking up the bridal arrangement that Maya had spent hours perfecting. "It's nice enough, I suppose, but you can see how it lacks the sophistication our clients expect. The ribbon work is adequate, the flower selection is acceptable, but it's clearly the work of someone who usually handles much smaller, simpler events." Maya watched in horror as Victoria dissected her work in front of an audience of society's elite, each criticism delivered with the precision of a surgeon and the cruelty of someone who enjoyed having power over others. The flowers that had made Maya so proud that morning now seemed to wilt under Victoria's harsh assessment. "I think we should focus on celebrating the couple," Maya said desperately, trying to salvage some dignity from the situation. "Of course," Victoria said with false sweetness. "That's exactly what we're trying to do, despite having to work with vendors who aren't quite up to our usual standards. I'm sure you did your best with your limited resources and experience." The phrase, limited resources and experience, hung in the air like a curse, and Maya felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. She had worked so hard, had been so proud of what she had created, and now she was being publicly humiliated by a woman who seemed to take pleasure in making her feel small. Around them, the guests continued to watch and whisper, their faces showing various degrees of sympathy, curiosity, and uncomfortable amusement. Maya realized that she had become the entertainment, the cautionary tale about what happened when you tried to reach above your station. "Perhaps we should let the ceremony begin," one of the older gentlemen in the crowd suggested gently, clearly uncomfortable with the scene that was unfolding. "Yes, of course," Victoria said, but her voice carried a note of satisfaction at having made her point. "Maya, perhaps you could return to the service area now. We wouldn't want any more disruptions during the ceremony." Maya nodded, no longer trusting her voice, and began to move toward the exit. But as she walked away, she heard Victoria speaking to the guests, who remained clustered around the altar. "I do apologize for that scene," Victoria said, her voice carrying clearly across the marble floor. "When you have to work with vendors outside your usual network, sometimes you encounter people who simply don't understand the standards expected at events of this caliber. It's unfortunate, but these situations can be learning experiences for everyone involved." Maya reached the service corridor and leaned against the wall, her hands shaking with humiliation and anger. Through the partially open door, she could hear Victoria continuing to discuss her inadequacies with the wedding guests, each word another small knife twisted in her pride. She had never felt smaller or more out of place in her entire life. The flowers she had created with such love and care had been dismissed as adequate at best, her skills questioned, her presence treated as an embarrassment. Maya closed her eyes and tried to remember why she had thought she could handle an event like this, why she had believed that her talent might be enough to bridge the gap between her world and theirs. The ceremony music began to play, and Maya realized that the worst part was yet to come. She would have to stay here for the entire reception, invisible and humiliated, while 300 people who had witnessed her public dressing down celebrated around the flowers she had been told weren't good enough. As the bride began her walk down the aisle, Maya pressed herself deeper into the shadows of the service corridor and wondered how she would ever find the courage to face another high-end client again. Maya watched through the service door as the ceremony concluded, her heart still racing from the humiliation. The guests were now moving toward the cocktail area, their conversations, a mix of wedding congratulations and whispered comments about the earlier scene. She could see Victoria directing staff members with sharp gestures, clearly still agitated about having to defend her vendor choices. The groom stood near the altar, shaking hands with well-wishers, but Maya noticed something odd. His eyes kept scanning the room, as if he were looking for someone. When his gaze found the service corridor where she was hiding, he excused himself from the congratulations and walked directly toward her. Maya panicked, thinking she was about to be asked to leave entirely. She straightened her dress and prepared for another round of criticism, but when the groom reached her, his expression was gentle and concerned. "Maya?" he said quietly. "What are you doing back here?" She stared at him in confusion. How did he know her name? In her nervousness about the event, she hadn't looked closely at the groom's face during the ceremony, but now recognition hit her like a physical blow. "David?" she whispered. Her brother pulled her into a fierce hug, and Maya felt tears she had been holding back finally spill over. David had grown more sophisticated since she'd last seen him 6 months ago, his success evident in his perfectly tailored tuxedo and confident bearing, but his eyes still held the same warmth she remembered from childhood. "I had no idea you were the florist," David said, holding her at arm's length to look at her. "When Victoria mentioned hiring someone new, I never imagined it would be you. The flowers are absolutely stunning, Maya. You've outdone yourself." "David, what are you doing here?" You said you were in London for business meetings. I am the business meeting, he said with a smile. Emma and I met when her father's company was negotiating a merger with my firm. I wanted to surprise you by inviting you to the wedding, but everything happened so fast with the planning. Maya felt the ground shifting beneath her feet. Your firm? Torres Capital Management. I've been building it for the past 3 years. We specialize in sustainable investment strategies for major corporations. The name meant nothing to Maya, but she could see from David's expression that it should. Before she could ask more questions, Victoria's sharp voice cut through their reunion. Excuse me, but the florist needs to remain in the service areas, Victoria said, approaching with her usual authority. David, your guests are waiting for you in the cocktail area. David's expression changed instantly, becoming colder than Maya had ever seen it. Victoria, I'd like you to meet my sister, Maya Torres. The color drained from Victoria's face. Your sister? The same sister whose work you just spent 10 minutes criticizing in front of my wedding guests, David continued, his voice carrying a dangerous quiet. The same sister whose talent and dedication you questioned, whose professionalism you undermined, and whose presence you treated as an embarrassment. Victoria began stammering apologies, but David wasn't finished. Maya has been creating beautiful arrangements for years. She built her business from nothing, works harder than anyone I know, and has more artistic talent in her little finger than most people have in their entire bodies. The guests who had witnessed the earlier scene were now gathering again, drawn by the obvious tension. Maya saw phones being raised to record what was clearly becoming another dramatic moment. I think there's been a misunderstanding, Victoria said desperately. I was simply ensuring that everything met the high standards your guests expect. My guests expect kindness and respect, David said firmly. They expect people to be treated with dignity regardless of their background or the size of their business. What they don't expect is to watch a professional being publicly humiliated by someone who's supposed to be managing this event. David turned to address the gathered crowd. I want everyone to know that Maya Torres is not only my beloved sister, but also the most talented florist I've ever encountered. Every arrangement you see here was created by her hands, with her heart, and with more skill than any of us could imagine. He picked up the bridal bouquet that Victoria had criticized earlier. This bouquet alone took 4 hours to create. Maya researched Emma's favorite flowers, studied photos of her grandmother's garden, and designed something that would honor both Emma's style and our family's heritage. The roses may not be David Austin varieties, but they are perfect for what we wanted to achieve. The crowd was listening intently now, and Maya saw several guests looking at her arrangements with new appreciation. A woman in an elegant blue dress approached one of the centerpieces and examined it closely. These are absolutely gorgeous, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The color combinations are inspired, and the texture work is incredible. Other guests began examining the flowers more carefully, offering compliments that Victoria had prevented them from expressing earlier. Maya felt overwhelmed by the sudden shift in attention, but David's steady presence beside her gave her strength. Victoria, David continued, I think you owe my sister an apology. A public one, since your criticism was delivered publicly. Victoria's face was flushed with embarrassment and anger, but she was clearly aware that her professional reputation was on the line. Maya, I apologize for my comments earlier. Your work is clearly of high quality, and I spoke inappropriately. The apology was stilted and obviously forced, but David nodded acceptance. Additionally, I think the guests deserve to know that Torres Capital Management handles the investment portfolios for several companies represented here tonight, including the firm that manages Sterling Events business operations. Victoria's eyes widened as she realized the implications. David wasn't just a successful businessman. He was connected to the financial networks that sustained her industry. I trust that moving forward, Sterling Events will treat all vendors with the respect they deserve, regardless of their perceived status or the size of their operations, David said. Professional courtesy isn't negotiable. As the crowd began to disperse, guests stopped to compliment Maya personally on her arrangements. The woman in blue turned out to be a prominent socialite, who immediately asked for Maya's business card for her daughter's upcoming engagement party. A tech executive mentioned that his company was looking for someone to handle their corporate events. Emma, the bride, appeared at Maya's side and took her hands warmly. David has told me so much about you, and now I understand why he's so proud. These flowers are exactly what I dreamed of. They're perfect. Victoria had retreated to manage the catering setup, her earlier confidence completely deflated. Maya noticed that other vendors were giving Victoria a wide berth, clearly having witnessed how quickly her authority had crumbled when challenged by someone with real power. As the reception continued, Maya found herself moving freely through the ballroom, no longer relegated to hiding in service corridors. Guests sought her out to discuss her work, and she found herself booking 3 high-end weddings before the evening was over. David stayed close to her throughout the night, making sure she felt included and valued. During his toast to Emma, he made special mention of Maya's contribution to their special day, generating applause that felt genuine rather than obligatory. Near midnight, as the event was winding down, Victoria approached Maya one final time. Her earlier arrogance had been replaced by nervous professionalism. "Maya, I hope you'll consider working with Sterling Events again in the future," Victoria said carefully. "We're always looking for talented vendors to add to our preferred list." Maya looked at the woman who had tried to humiliate her just hours earlier and felt no anger, only pity. "I'll consider it, Victoria. But next time, I hope you'll remember that talent doesn't depend on someone's address or the size of their operation." As Maya packed up her equipment, her phone was already buzzing with inquiries from guests who had been impressed by both her flowers and her grace under pressure. The woman who had started the evening feeling like an imposter was ending it with more high-end bookings than she had ever imagined possible. David helped her load the van, just like he used to help her with school projects when they were children. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said, "but I'm proud of how you handled yourself." "I'm proud of how you handled it too," Maya replied. "Though I have to ask, how wealthy are you exactly?" David laughed. "Wealthy enough that Victoria will think twice before treating anyone like that again. But more importantly, I'm wealthy enough to make sure my sister gets the recognition she deserves." Driving home through the empty city streets, Maya reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in a single evening. She had learned that success wasn't about fitting into someone else's definition of worth, but about staying true to your own values even when others tried to diminish them. The flowers that Victoria had dismissed as inadequate had become the foundation for Maya's entry into a world she had never imagined accessing. More importantly, she had discovered that real power came not from putting others down, but from lifting them up. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.